Hey everybody, how y'all doing? You guys ready to have some fun today? We have really a great treat for you guys today. We're going to be talking about comedy. We all know that as the world, every time you turn on the news, you're like, oh man, I really need some comedy right now because this is terrible. And luckily for us, we have three expert funny folks here who've made some outstanding films. Please make some noise for Shane McSauby, for Rocheé Jeffrey, and for Felicia Pride. Did I say your last name right? Yeah. Usually I was going to say this, and this is terrible, but usually when asked to watch comedy movies, I watch them and I'm like, it's not funny. But I was so blown away with your comedy chops. You guys are laugh out loud funny. You guys, their films really had me dying. I'm still thinking about them. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with you, Felicia. I was looking at you. You were like, you had that "don't ask me first" look on your face. So that's, of course, why I'm coming to you first. Felicia, tell us your origin story.
In terms of becoming a filmmaker, it came out of my experience of, I moved to Hollywood when I was 35 years old. I had one screenplay. I had no idea how to get it made. I'm a writer first. And so I learned very quickly that film in particular is a very heavy director's medium. And so I think it was out of a little bit of petty productiveness and also feeling like I had a very strong vision for certain stories that I want to tell, and being able to collaborate through an entire process of filmmaking is how I became a filmmaker in that way.
Right on. And same question for someone who makes their home in both Michigan and New York. Shane, tell us your origin story.
As far as film goes, I grew up just going to, there's a theater that in Grand Rapids where I grew up that was like $1 for movie tickets. It was second run theater, and so me and my dad would just go to movies every weekend, twice a weekend. That was our weekends, was just going to see movies. And so I just grew up really loving them, but as a kid you see the actors, and so I wanted to be an actor. And it wasn't until I was older that I got my hands on a camcorder in high school and directed something. I wrote something and directed it, and it was awful, but I was like, this is the coolest thing ever, you know? And then so from then on I sort of started being like, okay, I want to be a writer director, and I've been just chasing that dream, you know?
Chasing it well, very good. And of course, last but not least, Rocheé Jeffrey, DC area native.
Yes.
Shout out. Tell us your origin story.
I was conceived in Jamaica, which is actually important because I was born in Jamaica and I moved to America when I was 6 years old. And I think when I was 2, my mom went to Howard University in DC and left me in Jamaica, so I was alone a lot. And I think that's where my imagination was kind of born, out of telling myself stories, because I was the only child in a house full of adults. And when I moved to America, the first thing I did was audition for a musical, which is absurd. And so I kind of was exposed to storytelling and performing. And ultimately, when I went to college, my parents, being immigrants, were like, you can't have fun as a major, so I was on a law path, but I went to see Hotel Rwanda with my dad, who was a professor at my university, one day. And when I saw that film and he didn't cry because he was born stoic. It made me realize film and TV, this brings together all these things that I'm curious about the world, about making a difference, and also can really affect people in a really meaningful way. And I think that's when the seed was really planted to be a storyteller.
You know, I always feel like, by the way, I never saw Hotel Rwanda, so I'm sorry. I heard it's a very difficult film, not something we're going to talk about today. I always feel like funny people can't be made. There's nothing worse than somebody trying to be funny and you're like, nope. But I feel like funny people are born. I think you three were born very funny. So I'm going to stay with you, Rocheé. Tell me, what is your earliest memory of making somebody laugh?
I used to, because I was an only child and desperate for attention and a Leo, I would always perform for my parents who would thought I was hilarious, but that doesn't count. You know what I mean? Like, your parents often will think you're really funny. It wasn't until and I would make people laugh in high school because I was bullied a lot, so I used my humor. And then when I got to college, I remember specifically there was like a piece of string in my dorm room, and I think I mentioned that it was similar to Jennifer Lopez's Grammy dress or something like that. And a friend of mine busted out laughing and was like, "You're really clever." And I was like, "Oh." And that moment always stuck out in my head because she really took a pause and was like, "That was really smart." And I was like, maybe I'm more than just a silly person. Maybe I am actually clever.
Nice. Shane, same question. Tell us an early memory where you were like, all right, I got the room rocking with this one.
I mean, I was like that class clown in school, so I was just like making all my teachers' lives hell. I really want to apologize to all my teachers back in the day.
If they're watching, guys. Sorry about that.
I'm a professor now, and so like I was like, oh man, it's karma. But yeah, I was always like making people laugh, and I remember that feeling of just having the whole room going, and it's like the best feeling. And similarly with filmmaking, like I didn't start off doing comedies. I was like, I want to be a serious filmmaker, and but you have moments in there that are like meant for people to laugh. And like, so there's like 2 or 3 moments in a film where people laugh, and it's like that feeling is also, it's like I just need more of that.
You don't know until they watch it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, please laugh at this moment.
Yeah.
Yes, that worked. I want to go to you, Felicia. Not the same question. Let's get to the movies. Your movie, look back at it. Hilarious, guys. I want you guys to see these films. It's really made me laugh, and so much of the film is centered on relationships, on finding love, especially when you don't want to find love anymore. But we know finding love, it's a pain in the ass. Why do you think, historically, that relationships are such a great fertile ground for comedy?
Yeah, so Look Back at It was screened here at BlackStar last year.
Shout
First
out.
of all, yes, shout out to BlackStar, and thank y'all for having me and being a platform for filmmakers.
Yes.
Look Back at It is about a single mother in her 40s who gets her groove back with the help of her teenage daughter. And for me, it was like, I don't want to give away the spoiler, but what is the most absurd way a daughter could show her mother that she wants more for her mother? I see mothers all the time, particularly my own mother, who do a lot of sacrificing and choice making that puts others before them. So what is the most absurd way? And dating and having your daughter mingle or meddle in your dating life was one of the ways for me to do that. And it just is so ripe for comedy, for absurdity, for overstepping, but also something that I think we're all can relate to, just the fact that dating is an absurd activity. When you think about what we're actually doing, it's hilarious. The experiences that come out of it, it's just absurd. So I felt like that was a good way to kind of show what I was really getting at.
Fantastic. Last time I was home, my mother and my auntie was filling out a dating app called Silver Singles. And my auntie was like, look, I just want a cowboy. So I said, well, good luck. Shit. Going to you, Rocheé, your movie, oh my God, it's about a drug like Ozempic, but that turns people beautiful, but then it turns them into cannibals. It's called the Flaquita. The Flaquita is the Flaquita effect?
Yeah.
The Flaquita effect. You guys have to see it. Really laugh out loud funny. But one thing that I found really interesting about your movie is how superbly lit it was. The colors were so lush. It was indulgent. A lot of times with comedy, you don't really have great production value. Sometimes they get in the way. But I was wondering, as a filmmaker, wearing the filmmaker cap, why was it important for you to make sure that it wasn't just a funny film, but that also you had such a specific and lush look to it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely intentional. I feel like a lot of comedies are often kind of rudimentary in terms of how they're shot. It's
Absolutely.
just like two-shot, reaction, quick, pan. One of the things that I want to do is elevate how comedy is shot, how it all comes together. So for me, I always want to operate at a place of something that has craft and is artful, but is also kind of commercially viable. And I think there's a lack of that in the comedy space. And so I want to be able to blend those things together, for sure.
Very nice, very nice. Shane, turning to you, you know, one of the things, I had a show called Southside, and one of the things I was so proud of, thank you. I was like, I'm going to say the name, I hope somebody claps. Trying to be slick with that shit. Sorry, young man. No, but one of the things I loved, and this is something that Ice Cube talked about with the movie Friday, which was an inspiration for Southside, was that, you know, we often see our communities so distressed, and it's almost like poverty porn that Hollywood loves. They want to see us under pressure, and so we wanted to do some counter programming for people like me from the South Side, for him from South, you know, Central, to show, hey, we have a lot of fun. There's some similar things going on with your movie, Shane, with regard to the Native American community. And I was going to ask you, I feel like there's so much to learn still in film and television about Native American and tribal communities, because this is one of the earliest times that you're telling your own stories now. It's not somebody else telling them for you, thank God. Of course, like we've seen shows like Reservation Blues, which is incredibly unique and vibrant. Here's my question. Why is humor so valuable as a tool when telling your personal stories, and what part did humor play in your upbringing?
I mean, it makes it such an accessible way of like getting into topics and stuff. And to that point of like poverty porn, it's like Hollywood has, the people that make these movies have clearly never hung out in a Native community, because like you hang out with natives, it's just nonstop teasing and laughing and like joking and dogging on each other. And so for my upbringing, that's like what I've been around. Is like my house has just been constant of just like growing up, just constant laughter. And like I'm the quiet one in my family. Like I was the class clown, but I'm the quiet one in my family. And yeah, it's just sort of shaped everything of how I sort of like see and tell stories. And like I said, it's like you can deal with like Happy Thanksgiving deals with really incredible nuances of like the history of colonization and the holiday and how it celebrates this, but also like the native family is celebrating the holiday as well. And like it's a contradiction that's funny and can be exploited for humor. And it's a real thing. So it allows for discussion, and it also like, it's never like, this movie could have been a very easily like, just like telling the audience like, yo, this holiday is fucked up and you are bad for celebrating it, which isn't the case. But like, this allows humor and allows people to like walk away having a good time, but then being like, oh, I'm gonna think about this and have conversations about this with family and stuff. So
You did a really good job of also, like you said, just showing the diversity of opinion even within a household. So like everybody's got a different point of view about it. And again, that's something that a lot of times filmmakers of color just aren't afforded. I can tell you for a fact, if you were to pitch that to Hollywood, they'd be like, where's the pain? Can we see some crying in this? And you'd be like, man, come on, get away from me. Let me go back to you, Felicia. Your film, I was like, make sure I didn't skip, because y'all know I'm terrible. I was really, really impressed with the dialogue in your film. It was so naturalistic. It never felt like I was listening to a script. It felt like people were just talking. What kind of preparation did you and your cast undergo to help things sound more natural and to make sure that when you yelled action, that you got that really natural performance?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it starts on the page. I love the way Black people talk. We make up words, we make up sayings. So for me, it's like being a really good listener and observer of how we talk, and really not being afraid to put that on the page, and not being afraid to and not feeling the need to explain it either, right? And then I think from a director standpoint, it's casting. I'd like to cast people who feel like real people. You know, there are actors who are great, but they feel like actors. I wanted to cast people. Our lead, Angel Lakita Moore, is a mother of 4 boys, and, you know, very funny, and like has her mother groups and all the things. And then my a friend of mine is in it. She's plays the friend. She's just
She's super funny. Oh my God.
Well, she's a stand-up comedian too, Hadia Robinson.
That's where I know her from.
Yes.
Okay, sorry guys. Just
So,
discovering some things right now. Go
yeah,
ahead.
she really much felt like the character. So I was like, hey girl, how would you say this? So also allowing cast, we let her improv, so she would just say lines and we would all just be dying on set, like trying not to laugh too loud to mess up the take. But I think giving the actors freedom to feel and do and be themselves while also embodying the character was really important. So I think it goes down to casting and on the page, but also allowing that freedom of improvisation and like, I don't know if I would say that. And then also, like, I just wanted people who felt like my family. This project is definitely inspired by my mother, my sister, my niece. I wanted people who sounded like my aunts and my cousins, and yeah.
It really frees you up as a filmmaker when you get to set and your cast is just vibing and flowing and flying and it all feels good. Rocheé, I'm going to come to you because this is a similar question. When I watched your movie, I was like, they definitely ruined half these takes laughing. There's no way y'all didn't laugh. That shit is funny. People, running through the house, screaming and then stopping to flex in the mirror with their stomach out. I would have been dying on set. But my question to you is how do you do that balance? How do you focus on still making your days? I'm sure you didn't have all the time in the world. Still shooting your script, but also allowing space for the unscripted moments, for the natural moments to happen. Talk about how your process generated that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I believe that comedy comes through collaboration. And I think that I'm primarily a TV writer, and I've been in a lot of writers' rooms. And when you are in a comedy writers' room, you realize what you see on television or whatever, it's like it went through about 10 different brains.
This is so true.
And the joke was built on and demolished, and then somebody came in and went in another different direction. And so there's so much collaboration in making things funny. And then once you get to set, you see, oh, this actor added this, imbued this moment with this comedic beat that may not have existed on the page. And so I like to make sure that we get it as written at least once or twice. And then if, let's improvise. I think that's where you kind of get the fun, especially if you're casting well. You're going to have a vibe, and a lot of the funniest moments from that film just happened spontaneously. Like, he started flexing at one point. I was like, ooh, do that in the mirror. You know what I mean?
Hilarious, yes.
Like, so just allowing a creative space where everybody can bring their best selves, I think that's what makes for the best comedies.
Something you said is so important, and I've been very lucky in that I've been in a lot of writer rooms too, and a lot of people don't know that comedy is collaboration. For those of you who love comedy, who want to make it, it is not I'll put it this way, it is rarely a solo undertaking. Even stand-up comedians, they're collaborating with all the audiences and all the small clubs that they've been to figure out which of these jokes work and which of these jokes don't work. And of course, in a writer room, you kind of have that even amped up because you hear more and more. So I definitely encourage those of you who want to make comedy, share it, listen to it. Don't be afraid if somebody reads it and you're like, it's super quiet, it wasn't funny. It's better to hear that like in a room with your friends than to hear it once you screen the film and go, uh-oh, nobody's laughing at this. Coming back to you though, Shane, speaking of comedy and a little bit of comedy history, at least I thought it was, I love the part in your film where your protagonist is in the mirror, he's smearing some paint on his cheeks. We think he's putting on some kind of war paint, but then he's actually kind of tapping into that classic Eddie Murphy from SNL. He's going undercover as a white guy. This shit is really funny. But I will say, like, it was one of those movies that I was laughing a lot, but then I also had to learn because after he goes undercover, he gets this money. You guys should watch this film. I'm not ruining it. It's still great. But he burns it. He burns the money that he gets. And I'm curious if you could help us understand that moment. Tell us what you were going for when your protagonist did that.
For anybody that was at the Q&A last night, you're gonna hear the same answer. Okay. And that I don't like talking about that moment and like telling people what they should walk away with. There's been a lot of discussion. That's kind of one of the biggest moments of people are like, why do you do that? And it's one of those things where I'm like, for me, it's more fun if you sort of just walk away with what you take away from it. I can say very simply though that it was never about the money.
Yeah, I think that comes through pretty loud. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think people walk away. Somebody raised something last night about like burning in their culture, like burning money is part of like for the ancestors. And I thought that's super cool. It's not wasn't my intention, but like I want people to walk away with sort of what they do. If I could touch real quickly on the improv,
You
though,
can.
I think it's great using improv, but personally, I've never used it. And I do it a little bit in rehearsals, but I'm a huge fan of like rehearsing and definitely collaborating, but in a sort of different sense, in like having these discussions playing in the rehearsal process. But then once we get to shooting, and this one was shot on film specifically, so like we didn't have, like there was no time for improv, so every sort of thing was like very much like, okay, we've rehearsed the hell out of it, and now let's like free ourselves of all of the rehearsal stuff, but we sort of know the beats, and like let's go for it.
That's
and
a great process. I love that.
And I tell them like I want to be surprised though. Like I don't like the rehearsals isn't for like nailing it. Like let's get the wrong things out of the way. Let's see what works. Let's see what makes us comfortable, what makes us uncomfortable, and then like get everything out of the way. Let's go fresh and surprise me. And so it's very structured, very like kind of planned out, and very much like, okay, let's get it.
That really helps you grow also as a performer. For those of you who might act, I'm sure there's a couple in here. I had the pleasure of working with a really, really great director, really, really famous director, and he was similar in that he was like, I spent all this time at home writing these words. Say the words I wrote. Don't be saying your own words. But then you go to other sets, and they're like, listen, everything I wrote, I don't care. Just say what you want to say, make it funny. So I think it's really good, and you grow yourself as an artist when you do both. When you have those times you work with directors who are very specific and say, don't change a word, and you have other directors who are like, we're going to find it. One of my favorite movies comedically is this movie called Topsy Turvy. Apparently, it's like 50% improv. That's why the dialogue is so great. They were just making that up on the go, and it's a brilliant film. I love it. But now, let me come to you, Felicia. I come from a very big family. They were just everywhere. They're all over my work. Everywhere I look, there they are. And I was just going to say that, but they're also so important because that's my education in comedy. My first time making somebody laugh was my mom and dad when I was a little kid, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, cool, this works. So my question for you is, family is such a big part of your film, Look Back at It. I love how close that family is. It really feels like a real family. For you personally, what role does family play in your development, not only just as a filmmaker, but as a person?
I mean, they're everything, right? So this particular film, as I mentioned, Look Back at It was inspired by my mother, my sister, my niece. But also they became part of the filmmaking process. So my mom was location manager. My niece was a PA. We shot it at my aunt's house. My cousin plays the husband in the beginning. My homeboy was a PA. My homegirl, Rashida, did hair. So it became a community affair.
Shout out, Rashida.
I feel like that is, first of all, rare, and also it's something to leave a place, because I left home in order to go do something, right, to become a filmmaker, something to leave a place and then go back and be able to make work there was huge. And then again, just inspiring the look of the film. I was like, it needs to be Auntie's house. This is where we spent summers. Like, this needs to be. So being able to inspire both production design down to dialogue, as you mentioned, down to family dynamics. And, when Black people get together, they tend to talk over each other. So I wanted that dynamic of them talking fast and talking over each other and vibing off each other. Just
very naturalistic.
Yeah, I wanted it to feel like my family. So they were inspiration, but also collaborators in that way.
From Baltimore?
Yes.
Okay, I want to come back to that if we can, because I really want to get into that. Rocheé. Now, as somebody who is also a veteran of writer rooms, you know that one of the most successful tropes in comedy, and for those of you who want to write, this will be very helpful, is the odd couple dynamic. It tends to work. You get two folks on screen who really are very differently constructed, have different points of view, and if you do it right, it usually can lead to some funny stuff. I really, really enjoyed the banner between your two leads. It was so mismatched, especially consider that they were in a zombie apocalypse. They still had time to fight. But in terms of inspiration, I was curious. Maybe walk us through some of your favorites. Who are some of your favorite on-screen odd couples?
Tom and Greg from Secession.
Nice.
I think they're so messy. One of my favorite genres of TV is messy white people. Succession is a phenomenal show, and just seeing two people who are completely opposites naturally just. And I also did improv for a long time, and I think improv is foundational for comedy writing because it teaches you
It kind of comes through too, yeah.
Exactly. It teaches you how to build on the comedy, and you learn that like as a part of the craft. And I think one of the fundamental things you learn in improv is like the best scenes are two opposites, right? Two people who have completely different desires, wants, needs, objectives, and that creates so many opportunities for fun and games when you craft a story with two characters who are diametrically opposed. It makes for a lot of great comedic moments.
That's fantastic. I want to follow, but I'm going to keep pushing because I know we get into the Q&A pretty soon here. Shane, this is a forward-looking question, but I always love asking filmmakers this because we all have so many restrictions on us budgetarily, time-wise. A lot of times we have. I just saw a movie the other day that they shot a two-hour movie in 12 days. I was very impressed. But for you, if time was no option, if budget was no option, tell us the kind of film that you would make next.
I mean, I still want to make dark comedies. Like Happy Thanksgiving is very much a dark comedy. I'm working on a feature for a horror film that's a comedy. Like the situation is so ridiculous that it's like, it's very bizarre and kind of it's funny. But I don't know, I would love to have a big budget film. I also think about like, my dad supported me as a kid, like did everything, worked 3 jobs to put me in a good school, and was like has stories about falling asleep in a factory, like on a factory line, and just like really, and he's and so I would love to be able to work on big films so that I can like get my dad a house or get my dad a car, like a pickup truck. So really my goal, like I'm trying to reach high so that I can help my family out and get a car.
It's so noble. You guys are all good people. I love it. It's so unlike the people I usually talk to in Hollywood. It's so different. It's interesting, but both of you guys, I mean, all 3 of you have touched on family. And, I'm going to share some advice with you guys that I got from, what's her name? She was one of the best playwrights, Paula Vogel. She wrote a play called The Baltimore Waltz. But one thing that I did a seminar with her. One thing she said is that circles rise together. I want to share that bit of wisdom. And the reason she said that was she felt like her great success came from not reaching up and trying to have somebody help her out, but reaching out to her friends and family, reaching out laterally to the people who have been there with you from day one. So I encourage those of you who are trying to achieve something artistic to reach out. Your friends, your family, that's an invaluable resource. They'll also give you honest notes, not gonna lie to you and tell you it's good when it's not. And sometimes your greatest success, I mean, I did a show where a lot of the people are my family. You guys talked about working with your families, so I wanted to share that with you guys.
Can I just piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
Rocheé and I are in a writers group together. We are able to share work, and so we did a punch-up session on Look Back at It, and I gave notes on Foucault's effect. So to be able to have smart people around you who can give you honest feedback is invaluable.
It's clutch.
Yeah,
It's
really
clutch.
is. And who want to see you grow as an artist and as a filmmaker, for sure.
Speaking of neighborhoods that have been misrepresented, like by The Wire, let me just ask you this question about Baltimore. I really, really, really love the shots of the neighborhood. I know a few filmmakers who've recently moved to Baltimore to make it their new home, the new base of operations, and it seems like there's an effort to have a new burst of artistic creativity born from Baltimore, which, again, as we know from the media, the reputation is very different. If you're not actually from there, you might not be seeing the truth. So my question to you is, what are your hopes? What are your hopes for Baltimore from an artistic standpoint?
I mean, I'm really excited about this potential renaissance. I hope that it's long-lasting. I hope that artists from Baltimore are able to tell their stories in the ways that they see fit. I think a lot of stories that have been told out of Baltimore have not been by Black people, number one.
The Wire is 100% not by Black people, guys.
And even when I think about just Baltimore, one thing that was important to me was to show East Side Baltimore a very specific very specific neighborhoods in the east side of Baltimore that have grass and have trees. Because I feel like when I see Baltimore, we usually don't even see grass or trees. So that was just very simple, but important to me. So I think being able to have Baltimore artists show Baltimore in the way that feels authentic to them, where there's a diversity of fantastic artists. We had a festival called the Honey Child Fest that we did in August, and we were able to screen work from Baltimore artists. And there's just so many voices and stories, and I just want them to have money, access, and distribution for their stories. That's my hope.
And I encourage those of you, again, who are creators, like, we have enough movies about LA and New York, so I do think that wherever you're from, whatever neck of the global woods, I mean, if there are stories there, we're excited to see those stories. I'm going to come back to you now, Rocheé. Now, you obviously familiar with writer rooms, but I think filmmaking was a newer hat to wear. What did you learn? What did you learn about yourself, and what did you learn about your craft making this movie?
Yeah, I've made a few shorts before. Oddly enough, I'm mostly a comedy writer, but most of the things I directed before were dramatic pieces, like super dramatic, and so it didn't make sense. And at a certain point, I was like, oh, I need to bring everything together. And I think what I learned, honestly, had less to do with the craft and more about just my engagement with the industry, which was that I think a lot of times, as the Black woman that I am, you know, in comedy spaces, your voice can sometimes be just drowned out, and you can fight to justify why you should be in certain spaces, why they should take your take and your perspective, and making something that was wholly mine after spending almost a decade writing in other people's voices and satisfying their desires. I realized, like, oh, I have a voice, and it's interesting, and it's funny, and it works, and it was very empowering. And I think that whether you're in comedy or drama, whatever genre, making films and being able to just see your work in the world and to not have all of these different opinions that are kind of limiting you, it's very liberating, and it was a very empowering experience for me.
Shane, same question. What did you learn about yourself and about your process making Happy Thanksgiving?
I mean, Happy Thanksgiving was a really long process, and I learned quite a lot. One, that I can make a funny film, because I edited it for so long, and it was like, I was like, just in this dark room working on it, and I was like, this isn't funny. Like, none of this is funny. It's just dark. People are going to walk out of this and just be like, what the hell? And then we had a screening, and it was just like, I was like, what? Like, everybody was laughing at all the moments. And so one is like, we're all, everybody says this, but we're always our biggest critic. And like, that can really hold us back. And so maybe like, don't listen to it, or listen to it, but let it push you. Because like, I was overbearing with all these internal thoughts, and it really just like pushed me as well. Like, I let it ruin it for a little bit, but then it was just like, okay, I need to get this done.
I feel like that's one of the hardest things in comedy, is to remind yourself that this was funny at one point, even though I'm in this edit bay, and now I think this is terrible, and I think that they should not have let me do this. It was, because then after you go through all that, and then the first person sees it, you go, okay, all right, cool, it was good. Felicia, I'm asking you that same question. I have a couple of those, but I want to hear from you. What did you learn about filmmaking, about yourself, through the process of making Look Back at It?
I learned that I want to continue to make with people that I like. I think similar to Rocheé, my experience in Hollywood is that you have to work with a lot of people you don't like, who actually might not even be that talented. You know what I mean?
So true.
So,
especially on the executive side. You're like, why is this person giving me notes?
right. Like, I've seen the
You
show.
can't be funny. What you talking about?
And that I can make a film that, because one of my barometers for my work is like, will my cousins in Baltimore watch this? So I can make a film that my cousins in Baltimore will watch, but then also, can travel film festivals across the country, and so can have this sort of duality to it, and I can make my family proud, and also that I can, because my first forays into filmmaking were also more dramatic, more my first short that I directed was called Tender, and it was exactly that, tender, so that I could make a film that really felt like it combined my voice, like funny, Baltimore, black people, how black people talk, but also like saying something about black women and relationships and motherhood and all these, like I can actually do it. Then you're like, oh, I'm unstoppable. And my family likes it. Like, what can you tell me? Nothing.
I mean, that's the hardest thing, because most of comedy is about making strangers laugh, right? You're trying to get people who don't know you to laugh. That's really tough. Were you gonna?
Yeah,
yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for me, when I made my film and I took it to Maryland, where I'm from as well, and I was at Maryland Film Festival, and everybody was laughing, and I was like, they've been gaslighting me in LA, right? Because like you realize like, oh, we forget sometimes who we make this stuff for, and the people who are the arbiters and the gatekeepers are not necessarily plugged into what like the homies think is funny. So I think it's
so hard. Yeah, go ahead.
It's so hard to translate it, and so this experience made me realize like, yeah, it is so important to put work out there, to test it with real people in the world, because you can be jaded by the industry, and all of a sudden you're like, you're saying what is funny? Yeah.
You can also get gaslit by the industry, because, I mean, we had this experience on both my shows where we're turning in scripts to executives who are not laughing, and we're saying, no, the streets are going to laugh at this, and they're going, and you're going like, man, like, think about all the writers and filmmakers of color who have kind of smashed against those rocks, who've turned work into some network, work that we here would be dying laughing at and would love, and we never get to see it because usually white execs don't get it and they don't know what we're going for. And it's really a constant hurdle, but it really requires us to be incredibly, incredibly focused on listening to the voices that we trust, because those voices are the actual voices. So I'm wondering how much. Okay, so we got time now. That's perfect timing. It's now time for our Q&A. We got about 10 minutes, guys. We definitely. Oh, Tim. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Thank you very much. I have one more question for you, Rocheé. It's really about process. It's about, because I don't really know about horror comedy as much. You kind of deal with horror comedy in yours. It's always very funny when it works. It's very effective. But how did you even think of this idea of people taking a drug that makes them lose weight, look better, but then it makes them want to eat each other? And I was curious, how did the idea evolve? What changed from typing the first page of the script to you watching the final edit in the edit bay?
Yeah, so this idea is something that was in a completely different iteration for a number of years. I wanted to do something about black women being superheroes, like a satirical take on black women being superheroes and being tired of being superheroes. And then eventually it kind of evolved into this idea of like, yes, if black women had an opportunity to save the world, would they? Right? Like, I don't know. And then eventually, like, I just started layering more things, and then Ozempic started taking over the conversation, and I was reading all these articles where people were like, yes, this drug is wonderful, and I look great, but I might die. I don't know. Like, the New York Times literally did a whole thing where they were like, we don't know what's going to happen with people and this drug. And I thought that was just a beautiful way to bring two different ideas together that could work. Like, two black women trying to survive a hot zombie apocalypse, and also exploring, like, beauty culture and how it impacts, black women. And I will say some of the elements of this absolutely evolved because of collaboration. I'm very much somebody who likes to hear what other people think. And I like to get a lot of notes. I like to also engage with like department heads. And then like my producer, Ebony, read a draft and was like, what if they were hot zombies? And I was like, yeah, what if they were hot zombies? And I think just like being able to listen to other people and what their ideas are, I think that's how you can really make a strong comedy.
I love the scene where the three zombie ladies are walking at the end, but if you look closely, they're doing that like runway walk. I was like, that's clever. Very, so they never lost their true essence. We're going to go to the Q&A in 1 second, but before we do, I know a lot of times folks want to run ideas past you. They want to collaborate with you. So why don't each of you, and we'll start with you, Shane, let people know how they can get in touch. I'm assuming it will be through your social media. Maybe, how would they get in touch?
Yeah, I have you can contact me through my website. ishkwaazhe.com or my Instagram at ishkwaazhe. Just look up the spelling.
Ishkwaazhe.
It's, yeah.
I'm like, I know you got to spell that for us, but I think it's written down, y'all. Go ahead.
I'm at Felicia Pride on socials, and then my production company is Honey Child. We are dedicated to telling stories by, for, about Black women 40 and over. So you can find us at It's Honey Child on socials. Thank you. And then you can...
Got some love in the room. Hello.
You can watch Look Back at It at lookbackmovie.com, or you can just go to YouTube and put Look Back at It in there.
Very funny. Okay, Rocheé, how can we get in touch?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Rochee Jeffrey. I don't have anything else. I'm just on Instagram. And what else was it? You can watch the film in a year or so. It is streaming now. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
It's going to be virtual as well, I think,
virtual, yes.
tomorrow.
Yes, yeah. But eventually, hopefully next year, we'll drop it online.
And I am on LinkedIn because somebody has to be on LinkedIn. Let's get some questions from the audience. Yes, we're going to bring the microphone over. Young lady right here with the gold earrings.
Thank you all
Fancy.
so much. Thanks. Yeah. Really appreciate all the wisdom that y'all have dropped. So a quick question for y'all is, when it comes to writers' room experiences, so a bit of context, I'm part of a group that it's a production company, and we just brought together a group of writers to have a writer's room. Lessons learned, definitely. But what advice would y'all have? Because I think we're still in a phase where we don't fully know what we don't know yet. So what advice would y'all have for us to create a cohesive voice, especially when there's different writing styles, there's different personalities, there's different visions? How do we create something that is meaningful and cohesive and kind of like unified in that way?
Is there a showrunner?
That's a good question.
Yeah, typically the showrunner is the person who provides the vision for the room, right? So the idea is that we are here in service of the show, and we are here in service of the showrunner's vision. Somebody got to provide the vision, because I think what will happen is you'll have so many different visions that you're just not sure. So even what happens, you have a showrunner vision, but then you have other ideas. And then the showrunner's like, yay or nay, that aligns with the vision that I've set, but somebody has to provide the vision. And then, of course, leave space for ideas, but also you got to keep the train moving, right? So I think what happens sometimes in rooms is that, especially when the showrunner starts to get busy with production, is like, there's nobody to make a decision. Somebody has to make a decision. Put it on the board or don't put it on the board, but you have to keep the room running and have a decisiveness of like, this is the track we're gonna go down.
I would also just add to that, that you really, and I think this is more, from the perspective of just somebody in a room with other people, and you guys are trying to work together comedically, you have to become comfortable with the awkward, not funny, long stretches where nothing interesting is happening. Because often at the end of those deserts, you will find some really funny stuff. But I think, especially starting out, it's not going to be there at first. You're going to sit together. But the reason that Rocheé said comedy is collaboration is because every now and then, when you're in the room together, somebody says something that makes the whole room laugh. That's the stuff to keep. That's the collaboration. And then sometimes, for those of us who are experienced, you'll say something and nobody laughs. Even your friend in the room, you're like, that's messed up. You didn't even give me like a courtesy laugh, bro? Like, damn. But I mean, you got to be real. Like, no, don't laugh at it. That's one thing I liked about my shows. And like, even for me, because I was a showrunner, I was like, y'all won't even give it up to me. I'm like, that's messed up. But I think ultimately it's in service of the audience. And so, again, just be patient with each other and wait for those moments when everything really feels funny because everybody's laughing. That's what you're looking for.
Comedy rooms are tough. You just gave me a flashback. It's true. People will not laugh. They will stare at you.
I've seen new writers, people purposely not laugh at funny new writers because they don't like, no, you knew, I don't give a, no. You ain't earned it yet. This is true. I worked at 30 Rock for 4 years. I got stories. Now, next question, please. Anybody else questions? Yes, over here. I was going to say in the mask, but that doesn't really narrow it down.
Thank you. I actually have two questions, if permitted.
Permitted.
The first question is, How do you find the balance when writing comedy, when you're working in two genres, mainly like a dramedy? How do you find that balance with serious topics and trying to find the comedy in that situation?
Okay, now, I don't mean to be beefy, but I don't like dramedy. I'm just being honest with you. I think dramedy has ruined comedy from TV. I think some TV shows be winning awards, and I'm like, ain't no jokes in the whole show. I don't know how they won the comedy award, and ain't one damn thing funny happened on screen. I'm not gonna name any names. Y'all all know what I'm talking about. So that being said, I still will watch a really great dramedy if it's really good. But it's not something that I am personally good at. I don't know, maybe you guys want to jump in there.
Yeah, I've done of my share of dramedies, and then with this film, it's a horror comedy. I personally don't. When I'm breaking or plotting a story, I don't think about it from a comedy beat standpoint at first. I always start with like, what is the story? What is the emotional drive? Who are these characters? What's happening? And then I add and layer in the comedy, and that's how I'm able to balance it, as opposed to just, I think some people think breaking comedy is like, what's funny? And it's like, actually more so for me, it's like, what's the story here? What are the emotions?
What's real?
What's real? What's human? And then we can add in the things that feel organically funny, and that's how you build it. But from a technical standpoint, really with dramedies, you need to have at least one joke a page, right? But with a true comedy, you're talking about 5, 6, sometimes if it's Tina Fey, 45 jokes a page. And so that also plays a role in how it's balanced. It's literally how many jokes do you have, right? That is gonna determine the balance for sure.
I would also say, trying to your point about what feels real and human, I think that trying to get as close to truth as possible. And when I think about Black people, it's hard for me to watch things where Black people are not laughing at a certain point or there's no humor, because one of the ways that we get through tough situations is through humor. And through joking, and like if you just go on Black Twitter after something crazy happens, we got a million jokes about Black jobs,
So
right?
true.
So I think it's like, how would people actually react in this tough situation that I'm trying to convey? How would they actually react? And I think that often you will find the humor in that, because we will find a way to use humor to get through it, for sure.
I've heard it said by a few older people I've talked to, and I mean older than me, because I'm old too, right? But I've heard them talk about how the civil rights movement, as portrayed in movies, they don't show the laughter. They don't show that, yes, it was tough, but there was still moments of humanity. There are moments when people, even like Malcolm X, is making everybody die at the table laughing, and we never get to see that because all we see is the sort of filtered version where everything is serious. And so I think that's so true as part of our experience, is that humor, it's in some cases, it's what kept us going. You had a second question.
Yes, and when writing, do you have any, what's the word I'm looking for, tips on finding your voice when in your writing process? You guys are.
I have an opinion about.
It's a really good question, actually.
I
Yeah,
have
go
an
ahead. I'm
opinion
sorry.
about this. I think that you don't find voice, you cultivate voice. And I think you cultivate voice through the embodiment of who you are, through your environment, through your taste, through your aesthetics, and you lean into that. I think what happens often is that we are actually afraid of our voice. We have it, but we're afraid to actually lean in and go there. So I don't know if it's about finding it as much as it's about accepting it, and pursuing it wholeheartedly and pursuing it truthfully. So that's just my opinion on voice. I could be wrong, but that's how I've approached it.
Please.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of repetition of like writing and like sort of finding it. Like it's sort of just like, yeah, you cultivate it, but it's really, you just have to like do it, and you have to do it a lot. It's like that's sort of the journey of filmmaking and writing, I feel like, is finding that voice. And, it comes like with Happy Thanksgiving. I feel like this was like a big moment for me of like being like, oh, this really resonates with me. It makes me feel good. I have fun doing this. It feels authentic to how I see things, and like it's landing really well.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think voice is truly honesty. It's like when you're being the most honest, that's where you find your voice, and that comes through, I think, vulnerability. Like I discovered where my real like niche was comedy wise when I told the first story of mine that was actually personal. And that helped me to really understand like what do I see? How do I see the world, right? And that I think is really, really key. So I think the more honest you are, the more your voice is clear. But I also think experimentation is really important to find your voice. The first things I wrote was like Breaking Bad light, right? Because sometimes the first things you write are just like the things you enjoy and you just emulate
So
it.
true.
And so over time, by writing, I've written something like 34 scripts in my career. By the 33rd script, I kind of know like who I am now. But the first 10, I was a white man. I was like, I thought I was Aaron Sorkin. And it's a mess. Like when you read it back, you're like, whoa. So yeah, it just takes writing and creating.
And I think to that point about who you are, I think cultivating voice also is about living, right? Like I think sometimes a lot of, as an artist, especially when you're like, I'm trying to get put on, all you think about is art versus like life. And I think being able to lean into who you are, figuring out who you are, for me also like therapy was really incredible. I really make the connection between my craft and how my craft got better as I got to know myself better, the connection between the two. So that self-journey of who am I, what do I have to say to the world, and how do I want to say it, and being honest about that, I think is really powerful.
You know, really quickly also, I think, we're going to go to you in the gray mask next. I think also finding your voice is about finding your people, because so many great artists have experiences of showing their work and telling their work and trying to be funny, and nobody thought they were good until they found this other person, this other group, and then it was like, okay, these folks get me. So it's okay to not have found your group, and then when you find it, to really embrace it and go, all right, this is who I am. Let's go to a question here in the green mask.
Hey, thank you. My question is kind of, what are you all excited about, either in your own projects or things, you know, coming up, or in the world that's just like, yeah, I can't wait?
I am not excited, but I'm like anxious, right?
Hilarious.
But I also have a little hope, a little like dollop of hope. I'm excited about just at this point, just making things. I think I spent a lot of my career like trying to get other people, mostly white people, to get it and to see it and to believe in it. And I'm kind of over that. I'm more now kind of looking at my career in two ways. Like one, yes, the service, let me go pay my mortgage, sure. But then there's the other part of it is like, what are the things that I actually enjoy, and making those things no matter what it looks like. I think I'm in a season of just making it. And in terms of like, I'm pitching this short to a major studio in a couple of weeks, which is the first time pitching myself as a writer and director for a studio, which is really exciting. And so I don't really have any hope, but I'm also just like, we'll
Is this
see.
to make it a feature?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going
to
to say
make it
yes.
into
They're going to say yes. It's funny. Yeah, you got it.
But yeah, that's exciting.
You got it.
for sure.
Easy. Greenlit.
I have another short that I'm finishing up. If you haven't seen me around, it's because I'm in my hotel room tinkering and trying to get it done for this deadline. But it's going to be, I can't say what festival, but it's going to be premiering at a very large international festival coming up. And so stay tuned. I'm very excited. It's a horror comedy. And to the point of, do you?
Yes.
I want to talk on the genre,
Go for it. Go for
dramedy
it.
thing. Because again, I have sort of a different process, and I'm not saying one is better or the other, but this is just to offer a different perspective. In that, so for the drama, you have your dramatic setup of like, you have always let your character sort of ground you, and like, what is your character's objective? What are they gonna do to get their objective? And like, hopefully that's sort of grounding your dramatic drive, as well as the stakes. What happens if they don't get their stakes? But then for me, the comedy comes in as like, okay, I'm gonna push like what they're gonna do to get what they want is gonna be like the most absurd, like really pushing it. And then I'm gonna have like every force sort of just like pushing them in the mud and making it as difficult as they can, and making their reactions to all of this stuff funny and absurd. And so like for me, that's where the comedy comes in. I don't ever think of like jokes and putting stuff like that in my scripts. I do have fun, like if I'm not having fun writing it and like laughing to myself as I'm like, ooh, a food fight at Thanksgiving, like nightmare. You know, it's like, then I'm like, okay, it's probably not a good comedy. So that's sort of like my approach to it. And like the comedy will come by like just pushing everything to the extremes to like what you want, you know?
Felicia, what are you excited
I
about?
too am working on turning Look Back at It into a feature film, so super, super excited about that. And I'm also excited. Well, thank
Dope.
you. I'm excited about what we're trying to do at Honey Child. We have an audio division. Our first podcast, Child Please, was twice nominated for an NAACP award. We also are looking to get into doc and unscripted, and then we have shows set up at studios around town. And so I'm just excited about having this hybrid indie, 1 foot in Hollywood, 1 foot out production company that is niche based in serving a audience that has a lot of social influence and social capital that is very ignored by Hollywood, and just trying to make some shit happen.
Dope. So dope. And I'm trying to start a new comedy venture in Chicago, which I can't talk about, but I'm so excited about it. Really excited about it. I can't wait to premiere it. Do we have any other questions? I know we're kind of winding down here. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. This will be the last
question. Anybody got any? Oh, here. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask kind of a multifaceted question. So going back to when you were saying earlier about talking to executives and dealing with people in Hollywood, as well as staying true to yourself and to your craft, when you're in negotiations and you're talking about bringing a project forward, at what point do you decide within yourself, like, all right, they're trying to change this too much and I can't stay true to myself or true to this piece and I need to walk away? And I know that's a little bit difficult because it's going to change with each piece that you bring forward, but where do you go after that? Do you take it back and say, all right, I need to try somewhere else? Or with all the different social media outlets and different ways that you can present a piece, do you say, I'm going to take this maybe like, I know like Issa Rae did her thing on like YouTube for a long time, and you're like, well, I'm going to just take this here? Or how do you decide which direction you're going to go when you really believe in what you're bringing forward and you don't want someone to tinker with it too much, but you really want to bring it to the people? Which way do you decide which way you're going to go with it?
I would say that that's a very layered question because it all
Could not
depends
agree more.
on kind of like where you are in your career, what kind of deal you actually have. Sometimes you can get the rights back, sometimes you can't. And I personally feel like before you start with going out with a project to find collaborators or whatever, you have to make a decision about how much of a hill you're willing to die on, right? So for me, there are certain things I'm not ever gonna take out to a studio because I would die if they make me cast a certain person, or if everybody is, not what they give me notes that just don't make sense. So I think you need to make that decision as early as possible before you go out with it, because some things I'm too precious about and I'm never gonna take it to a major studio. So yeah, it depends on a lot of different factors in terms of what you can do next, really.
Yeah, really quickly. I think that is a very layered question because before they can change it, they have to buy it. So, and they're the ones who have the money to make it. And then sometimes they buy it, and sometimes they think what they bought is different than what you're selling. I think the best thing you can do as an artist is to, all through the sales process, be as clear as possible about what your idea is and be prepared to fight for it. But it's so complicated because sometimes they want to change it. Sometimes those changes are changes you can actually do and then turn it back to your thing a little bit later. Sometimes those changes, this is what usually happens. You do the changes and then it still doesn't go anyway. And then you go, why did I do all those changes and this thing didn't happen? Or you don't do the changes. And sometimes I've had this happen where I said, no, you guys are wrong, and they just killed the project. So it's a tough one. It really is. And that's why you talked about your status, because ultimately, sadly, the best thing to do is just to have a high enough status and enough big names on the project that when they come with that BS, you can say, no, we're not doing that. But that is very difficult to achieve.
Yeah.
And it's really not particularly maybe even helpful for a newer writer to hear it.
Yeah, and I would say, too, I think I really agree with Rocheé's advice. Like, at Jump, there's certain projects that I'm just not going to take to Hollywood. Like, I already know. Like, Look Back at It is something that we're going to raise money for because I already know what the bullshit, I already know what the notes are, and I don't care, I don't want to take them, right? So I think there's certain projects, and there's also certain projects that's like, this is a check. So I think it's also classifying and categorizing projects. I also am very big on turnaround in my negotiations. So I'm always like, well, what's the turnaround meaning? If this doesn't go with this network, how fast do I get it back? Is also something that I'm always thinking about and talking to my lawyers about up front, because you may not be able to get it back, but if you can have those conversations up front as well. And then sometimes the changes are literally network mandates. You know, Netflix changes its mandates every 5 days, every 2 days. They like, we want
absolutely, so true.
superheroes, now we want, whatever. So sometimes it's just literally they move with the wind. And I think you also have to ask yourself, because you're going to be the one, if the show was to go, you're going to be the one 3 o'clock in the morning rewriting that script, not the execs. Is this a show that I actually want to be up 3 o'clock in the morning rewriting the script? Is this a show that I actually want to put out into the world? That I think that also helps. And then me, I operate where I'm always in a position and willing to walk away. Like, that has given me tremendous leverage in negotiation. That's given me tremendous leverage just across the board in my career. It was like, fuck it, I'm gonna walk away. I have to deal with the consequences of that, but I'm always know that I'm not trapped, I'm not stuck, and I have a ton of other stories to tell. This one will come back to.
Can I just say really quickly, it's so important to have more than one story, right? Because it gives you that power to be able to be like, yes, I was really passionate about this, but I'm also passionate about this one. And even if it's not about them giving you terrible notes, sometimes things just don't work out. So just cultivating ideas and having a list of things that you want to create, it's actually very empowering.
Well, I don't want us to get kicked out of here, so thank you so much to our panel. Thank you for those wonderful questions, guys. These folks are reachable if you have further questions. And more than anything, thank you, BlackStar. Thank you, BlackStar.
Thank you.